Order. This is a regular meeting for Lebanon Community School Corporation, July meeting. This meeting is a meeting of the school board and public for the purpose of conducting the school corporation's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There will be time for public participation as indicated by the agenda. The meeting site is fully accessible. Any person requiring further accommodation should contact the superintendent at the school corporation's office. First, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I've asked Mr. Clauser to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, we have roll call. All members, except for Mr. Hendricks, are present. He is absent. Next, we have mission statement. Mrs. Jones.
Lebanon Community School Corporation challenges everyone every day to reach a new best.
Thank you. Item 2, approval of minutes for the June 20th public hearing and regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Mrs. Hutchinson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Jordan, or Jordan, Mr. Clauser. Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next is certify executive content for the June 20th executive session to discuss job performance evaluation of individual employees. Do we have a motion to certify executive content?
I'll motion.
Mrs. Jones. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We'll get Mrs. Hutchinson. How's that?
Wow, snuck in there.
She snuck in there. Any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, superintendent's announcements and celebrations.
Thank you, Mr.
Dr.
Parks.
Miller.
I'll be brief this evening. Just want to take a moment, congratulate our FFA members, continue to rack up accolades in their various competitions. You have information in your background notes about several students who first, second, third place
Yeah.
finishes in the state convention, and very proud of the work that they continue to do. So my congratulations to them. We are very close to the start of school. We had our first long administrative meeting, retreat day with them this past week. I put at your place settings the book that is our book study this year for administrators. I'll say that I had some interesting looks on their faces when I passed out a book with the title "Quit" on the cover. It's an outstanding book written by it's a doctor of psychology. However, many people know Annie Duke as a reigning World Series of Poker champion, is one part of her life. The challenge with this book is that in order to make improvements, we have to make choices on what to do, and that usually entails quitting doing something else to make room for what is going to make a difference and what is pointing in a positive direction. That's a summary of the book in short, but we're looking forward to going through that together, so I hope the board will enjoy that as well. We'll be welcoming our staff back on July 31st. Remind the board that we are welcoming Dr. Bill Daggett from the Successful Practices Network. He will be doing a double keynote for our staff on the morning of the 31st. We've reached out to some of our community leaders, civic leaders, business leaders. We're already starting to get some RSVPs from them to attend because Dr. Daggett's message, as I've shared with them, is Dr. Daggett is much a futurist as he is an educator. So he is very plugged in to many of the technological advancements and changes that are going to be facing our students in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And we actually have he's agreed to sit down in a private meeting with some of our local business leaders for lunch following his second keynote, and we're getting some interest in that as well. So again, invite the board. I'll begin at 8 o'clock. The second session is at 10 o'clock, if you can only make that second half. And then please let Melanie know if you can make that lunch that would start at 11:30. Is that more of a private meeting with Dr. Daggett, and we'll make sure we get some lunch for everyone and get that coordinated. So we're looking forward to that. We do have, before Mrs. Hutchison asks, we do have some unfilled positions. And I know she'll always ask me here at the board, do we have all of our positions filled? No, we don't. We are still short a few positions here in the district, unfortunately. A couple elementary positions, high school science and high school agriculture right now are positions that are remaining open. So we have some Plan B and C to help support the students, but we do have some unfilled positions. And that is all of my superintendent announcements.
All right. Well, thank you. Next, we have informational items. More, Dr. Miller.
Yes, more of me. It is still required of school districts to discuss the teacher evaluation plan that will be utilized by our administration in the classrooms to help provide the teacher appraisals on their classroom performance. We are not changing our plan, but it is required for us to discuss it. And so it is in your packet. It's quite lengthy, it's quite involved. And so if you have questions this evening, that's great. We have administrators here that could help answer your questions, or of course contact me and I'd be happy to pass those questions on. I will share that the legislature altered the Indiana code around teacher evaluation. That went into effect July 1st, providing quite a bit, well, not quite a bit, a significant amount of autonomy back to the local school districts in the design of your teacher appraisal plan or your teacher evaluation plan. We do plan to take advantage of that legislation and modify with dialogue with our teachers ways that we can improve our plan, but it's not as in lockstep with a state-approved plan. They've given that autonomy to the school districts with the restrictions of the 4 categories, which you're all familiar with: highly effective, effective, needs improvement, and ineffective. Essentially, that is the only restriction and or requirement with schools developing their plans at this point. So we are going to go back, look at our rubric, look at that design, and we're looking forward to that dialogue with teachers. So that is part of that information item tonight. I'm checking that box. Be happy to answer any questions you might have about that. And then the second item is also a requirement that we discuss the results of the 2022-23 school year and categories that teachers were in at the end of that school year. So I'm reporting to the board this evening. We evaluated 258 certified staff. 89 were effective, representing 34.5% of the staff. 164 teachers rated highly effective, that would represent 63.6%. Improvement necessary, 5 teachers or 5 certified staff, representing 1.9%. I will share that our administrators work closely together to align our expectations, and we have a very involved rubric, which is part of the plan in front of you this evening. So that is really, those 2 information items are to check those statutory box, but also give you an opportunity to ask any questions.
Do we have any questions?
So I assume the very small 1.9% are on some kind of PIP or?
Most of the instances, if a certified staff member is in that final category, it would involve a plan with the administrator. There are requirements around those plans as well. They're best practice, even though they're in statute, they are best practices, which is to support the teachers, to give them opportunities to earn their PGP points when they do additional professional development, provide mentors. So there's many steps to that process, but yes, that would be accurate.
It is good that we get to cater some stuff to our needs and to our system too.
Yes,
so, yeah.
yes, and there's some, I'll use the term off the shelf. That gets a bad rap sometimes when I use that term, when folks use that term. There are some outstanding off the shelf, if you will, rubrics that now we can, with permission of course, making sure that we're following the permission from those publishers, be able to blend some things that will maybe meet our our needs and how we want the, what we want the verbiage to be to represent that, yeah. And aligns with our new mission statement and our new guiding principles, for
Correct.
example.
Excellent. Nothing for
No action.
For no action there.
Nope, those are information.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Next item is the new elementary school naming committee and potential names.
There you go. We have a representative from the new school, elementary school naming committee with us this evening, Principal of Central Elementary, Mackenzie LaCrone. I'm going to pull it up on the screen for you. We have met 3 times.
Yep.
And I've asked Mackenzie just to outline again for the board the requirements in your board policy of that committee and the steps they took, and then she will share with you the results.
So thank you guys so much for letting me come and share this information. For obvious reasons, I'm super excited about this name of this building. And you know, a name that can stand the test of time, but more importantly, I'm more worried about what goes inside the building. So the name is important, but it was awesome. I do want to make sure I mention all of the board member or the committee members that came and met. It was a great representation. We had Jerry Bohannon, who's a former LCSC principal, as he said, a principal of every elementary but Central. Jane Myers, who is a former board member. And then we had Kim Larman, who is a current teacher at Central. Marta Williams, who's a Hattie B. Stokes teacher. Susie Boyette, who is a Harney teacher and also the union president. And then Mary Dickerson, who is an assistant principal at Perryworth. And then it was co-chaired by Dr. Milliman and Trey and Mr. Hendricks. So it was nice to come together and kind of get to talk about this. So as Dr. Milliman said, we formed this committee due to board policy because the naming of any new entity, building, has to follow the board policy. So as you can see, I'm not going to read all of them to you, but the biggest one that we actually talked about just to when we got community input, which I'll get to in a minute, is about the names involving a person and kind of really looked into what criteria that had to meet also. So the committee process included a communication plan and opportunity for students and the public to be involved. So the committee met, and then Dr. Milliman and Lexi put together a survey to send out to all community members. Got lots of feedback, lots of different names. And I just also want to say it was nice that each person had to give 2 names and the reason why. So it was kind of cool to see the name and the reason why. We did have to all do a little digging because some of those reasons why maybe were obscure, maybe had some falsehoods. So. And there was one that was homage to, we could name it Milliman, so we could have gone there. That did not make the top 3 to present to the board, sorry to say. So we did consult the public, and then we came back together, and as our board policy presents, that we can give up to 3 names, but no less than 2 potential names for the school. So at this time, I can give the 3 potential board names. Dun, dun, dun. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about these 3. The first one was Prairie Creek Elementary. Most of you probably know that's the large watershed. It goes across the east side of John Bart Road. But it also, kind of cool fact I learned from Dr. Milliman, it also flows, it's the one that's behind the current Central, that watershed. So it's kind of, that's a cool little connection piece because it kind of brings them both together. So also Central Elementary was one of the names. That's the name of the current building that I will be going to. And then Cedar Grove Elementary, which is a nod to Mr. French, who was credited with naming Lebanon. So those are the 3 names that the naming committee would like to present to the board. And obviously our timeline that we set out was the board meeting presentation and recommendation, and then by the next board meeting in August 15th, that board selection of a name of the new building. So before groundbreaking, we can have,
Yep.
we can have
And
a
I
name.
might share, just so Mr. Parks can be part of the fun, he may or may not be in attendance in August, so we may be moving the vote.
Yes, I may be, I will be absent in August, so we had discussed possibly moving this to the
He
following
has to be
month.
part of this fun. So, it will be.
You'll just
It gives
keep
us
us
time
all
to change
in
the board
suspense.
policy too, though.
Right.
To a hearing.
You
to
do
put
two
it-
meetings, you do two meetings. We just make an action item for the policy prior to the decision.
Right. Just keep us in
so
suspense.
And we'll be fine in a groundbreaking timeline. As you know, we began quite a bit of preliminary work at Perry Worth and quite a bit of preliminary site work at Harney before we embarked on an official groundbreaking. So, that's a flexible, it is Indiana, so would like to have the groundbreaking in October and try to avoid November. We know how that can be in this state, so, but we would still be on track for that time.
Awesome. Do you guys have any questions,
Questions,
thoughts?
It's gonna be hard to decide.
Yeah. That's why it's a board decision.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, yeah.
No.
Can you combine?
I was,
We call it Central Prairie Cedar Grove Elementary.
okay, I'm gonna come to you as an elementary principal, think of a T-shirt. I really can't fit all that on a T-shirt.
Gotta put it on a t-shirt.
Right, so, thank you guys so
Yeah,
much.
just,
Go
the
ahead.
Cedars one, I think that's the name of the high school yearbook, correct? Right? As
Okay.
well. So, yeah, ties there.
That's a connection there too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. Thank you,
Thank you.
absolutely. It's a pleasure. I get very excited about any little thing with the new building, so he told me about carpet. I got really excited about this, so. Right, exactly. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right. First reading of policy update.
Yes, this policy's been before the board previously, actually not long ago. This is the public participation at school board meetings. Mr. Dennis, Mr. Martin, and I attended the ISBA legal seminar, law seminar, about a month or so ago. This was a topic there. That's why you attend those. That's why you're involved in those. And it's caused me to reflect a little bit on our current policy. So I did have it reviewed by Julie Slavens at ISBA, attorney for ISBA, and she pointed out that the first paragraph, which we've added in green language there in your background notes, clarifies more properly the requirement of the 50% participation, and the board shall provide an opportunity for public feedback. We had 98% of the language that was explicit enough, but we weren't just explicit enough
No.
that we shall provide that opportunity for public input. So that was the addition there. The other addition was something that the board requested at the last passage of the policy, which was we do ask our patrons to identify themselves, their name, the matter that they wish to talk about in front of the board, and their place of residence. And the board, I believe smartly, does not require our students, when they come to address the board, to provide their address. And so that was the addition as well, just for the matter of student safety.
Yeah.
So that's what that language is there. So first reading, but happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Any questions? All right. Thank you. And that will be heard at the next meeting then as well?
Yeah,
Second.
passage for second reading next week. Yep, thank you.
Next, school construction renovation update. Just a note, several of us just took a tour of the new softball
Yes.
complex, and I actually snuck over to Harney as well to see
Yeah.
the progress. It's excellent to see things moving along, so.
Thank you. You wanna introduce the gentleman?
Yeah, actually two construction informational items tonight. I'll go ahead first prior to introducing our guests, but mainly because the board will see these in the claims as a part of this evening's docket. Fees for Schmidt and Associates. I did want to make the board aware that you recall earlier this spring, we of course
passed the agreement with Schmidt for design services for the middle school, a new transportation facility, and renovations to the high school. And as a part of that agreement, and more particularly their compensation, was a percentage-based fee that will ultimately be locked, let's say, once design development is reached, which is a stage of design. So their initial invoices were simply based on a discovery understanding of what our needs may be, just so that invoices could begin and they could be compensated for their time. I wanted to make the board aware that we have now reached schematic design, which is another phase of the design process. And now that we know more about the needs, both at transportation in the middle school specifically, the contract amount with Schmidt has adjusted up to, as the early estimates were low, specifically with the middle school. As we have dug in on that has become much more of a project. And so mainly wanted to bring to the board's attention that Schmidt's total fee as a result of a better understanding of the needs at those buildings has increased at this time. And there will be one more change, obviously, once we reach the design development stage. I won't say that will be an increase. Of course, if the budget for some reason went down, the invoices would be adjusted downwards. So again, with that being, those invoices being presented to you in the docket this evening, wanted to, of course, be transparent about the fact that that fee has changed at this point, now that Meyer Najum has returned to schematic design. So, and with that, happy to answer any questions on that particular item if the board has it. Okay. I believe our last informational item would be to invite our design partners at Gibraltar up. I believe they've got some exciting updates to share with us for the previously mentioned new elementary school that Ms. McCrone was speaking about.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis, members of the board, Dr. Blumen. Nice to be here. Long journey. Started probably over 2 years ago. So we're very excited to be here tonight and say thank you. You saw the picture of some of the team members from the Gibraltar team who couldn't be here tonight. With me is Dale White, principal in charge, and Joe Fitzgerald, who was lead architect for the new elementary school. So we're excited to give you the final outcome, final update for the building as it's going out for bid, and just kind of give you a recap of some information, and then there'll be a little bit of new information, and all this culminates, in the documents include things that people get most excited about. Our wonderful design team putting together a color board, which talks about and expresses things like carpets and paints and colors and all the exciting things that teachers and students really enjoy. So despite the fact that we're architects, interior designers, engineers, it's not lost upon us that the real mission is what we started out with over 2 years ago with Chris Kingery, our Chief Education Officer, and is represented by Dr. Jennifer McCormick being our chairman. It's kids first, and it's the learning environment, and it's how the building gets utilized for the Lebanon community over the next some years. That's really important and not lost upon us, despite the fact we're bricks and mortar at the end of the day getting something built for you. So if this works properly, there we go. So some of the information in the booklet that we provided, I won't go over tonight, just sort of a nice introduction and gratitude, and if you were to post this online, it would help the community who maybe come on board a little bit late in the process, get them caught up with the Lebanon School's mission and things that from school board level we know are important to you. And then we always like to include, because it's just a little bit about why we are what we are and what we do at Gibraltar in terms of how we observe the learners and how we observe the instructors and the teachers and how that works. Many of these things for you once before, but everything is in its place now. It's going out for bid. You can see from this illustration we've left green space to the north of the new elementary school with Fordyce Road at the bottom and John Burrow on the right, but there's room to the north, a grassy area. Always want to plan ahead at the campus and what's next. Building is a good neighbor. It sits nicely. We've thought about traffic and landscaping and some of the things, for example, it's always good when you can have a site that has 2 roads for entry, exit, for safety and security and first responders, and so you have that. We did do some intentional and purposeful value engineering. As we know, the market is very volatile, and we get our input from Meyer Najum and take their lead, and if things in terms of cost go up, we look to where are the low-hanging fruit items that you can always come back and add later. Parking spaces would be the best example. I don't know that there's been an elementary school in Indiana that has enough parking spaces, and it happens to be next to their high school and contiguous. And even then, those parking lots fill up pretty quick. So things like parking spaces, you know, you just go back later years when you decide, okay, now we have a little bit more budget, and you can add parking spaces. So everything's in a good place, and we've vetted all of that. And we're very mindful of buses and cars. So the blue is the buses, and the red is the cars on this diagram that you see here. So you can see how they're separate and everything happens smoothly. I get asked all the time, gee, why are there so many cars nowadays? I don't know the exact science. I don't have any backup materials to give you data that would support statistically why exactly that's happening. I could just tell you anecdotally, it seems like families are busy, moms and dads both work, and so you have sometimes grandparents, for example, waiting in line at the car queue, and there must be some sort of deterrent on school buses. I've driven a school bus. I don't think they're that bad, but students tend to not like that. So again, parent time in the car and car ride. So you can see the red line is very long and lengthy to really anticipate in today's environment the number of cars, which would probably easily exceed 100 on any given day for what we call car riders. I'll do it kind of quickly. You remember the building, it has room to expand to the north with additional classrooms. What I really like about the way this plan had come together was right from the beginning, even as we were just talking about what a new elementary school would mean for Lebanon schools, you see in the left side of the front entry and the event entry, that you can see is cafeteria and gym and media center, all the things that the community is going to enjoy if they're invited in for a weekend event or an after-school event. So it's all there so that you can celebrate what's happening in the school. And then on the right side is the business of the school, which is classrooms and so forth. So we try to anticipate these types of community uses so that if you want to, you can consider locking off the building, for example, and have visitors only in the cafeteria gym area. By the way, if you have any questions, you can just interrupt me. I'm feeling like I want to be sensitive to your time tonight, though. Beautiful building. Just some data in the booklet for you. And then I like these pages in your booklet, and just to touch on tonight, and there are so many more detailed input sessions that these pages do not reflect. There's just a wealth of input that we had with Chris Kingery and our principals and your staff that have been great to work with, so that, you know, basically everything is in its place. Begin with the end in mind. What are the purposes? And so we try to express that appropriately with your staff and leadership so they can say, yes, that's the type of building that we know will be functional and useful for years to come. And then we start to visualize. Pictures worth 1,000 words. What will this look like? How will this feel? So if you take these illustrations and then look over in the boards, you can start to see, oh, this is going to be the carpet. This is the exact color of yellow that's going to be, as you see, represented in the illustrations and transferred over to the color board. And all of that was done with input from the district, as the school board would want. And then we just put a couple of placeholders in here so you can see, you know, classrooms is going to be where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. It's where the little learners, most of them stand about this tall, that we're always aware of for the purpose of having them in classrooms. The furniture will be very important. Mr. Dennis and Gibraltar are facilitating how we can get that most exacting, and that comes, of course, probably a year from now when it really comes to fruition, when parts of the building get finished, or in this case, 2 years from now when the building opens, fresh new furniture that's very flexible and agile. And you can see we start to just show different arrangements of the room plans. And I really like this slide because the goal, so think of the classroom as like the toolbox. We're talking about construction. Contractors have tools in their tool belt with screwdrivers and drills and all that. Think of the classroom as the teacher's toolbox. So what do they get to work with within those walls? And really, when today's environment comes to fruition inside the schools, it is the furniture and the technology devices that become the tools for the teacher And what we know about little learners is experiential learning, and the environment really does influence. And so when teachers can adjust the rooms on the fly and make different types of environments, like any one of these work on any given week, based on what they're teaching, it can be so much more impactful than the old days when everybody just sat in rows and that was the end of it. Well, I guess unless you were in kindergarten, you might have had a play corner with a little reading spot. But anyway, teachers, they'll just really be excited about using this. And by the way, if you remember, all the schools that you've endeavored us to design at the elementary level have this for you. Harney, and I mentioned Perryworth as well. And then just some more nice visualizations of the classrooms. We like to use colors and patterns and things that are timeless. We try not to be too trendy. And we try to let if you think about visualizing a room, it's what the kids bring in with their smiles and their clothes and the excitement. It's not necessarily about the carpet overwhelming the classroom or the wall color overwhelming the classroom. And we get lots of compliments on this. Moving further through the building, just everything is intentional. Nothing is by accident. So you can see we talk about, and that's why we have Chris Kingery on our staff for educational leadership, what is actually going on in a current cafeteria. And COVID even taught us some things. So we're bringing those things forward, such as serving lines, and a new trend, if you're wanting another little tidbit of, is having sinks in the cafeteria, where kids can walk over and wash their hands as they're getting ready to go to lunch and get their food, just to encourage additional cleanliness and get those bacteria away from them and down the sink. Cafeterias tend to be a fun space. This is how the gym will function and flow in and out. And what we like about this stage is, as you can see, it's purposely in between the gym and the cafeteria. Some of you remember when I held up the floor tile and said it was 1 square foot, and you pay for every square foot. So you think about the stage, you're getting 2 for 1. You get a stage for both the cafeteria and the gym when we put it in the middle like that. So we like to be clever and show you how you're getting the most out of your dollar. This is what we call an extended learning space. So when the buildings grow and become of the size it is, 600, 650, 700, and we're doing a brand new building where we can do anything that we can imagine because there's no existing conditions restricting us. This is a way, if you think about the little learners, you could gather about 60 of them probably in this space right here. And so we try to do that in the corridors because you need the corridors to walk through and do that for the movement and make that proper. But now when you think about, well, if we just made it a little bit wider, we can have another alternative learning space or an extended learning space for staff. Hey kids, let's go out in the hallway and we'll share with Mrs. Smith next door and we'll read everybody's poems. And we know about elementary learners. In fact, I may have heard this from Dr. Daggett 18 years ago. It was probably the first time I heard him speak. What we know about little learners is when they go peer-to-peer and they share things with one another, it's more impactful for them. They come home and say, hey, guess what I got to do, Mom and Dad? I got to read my poem to my classmates. So it just makes the poem writing a little bit better. And again, beautiful space, durable materials. We're trying to squeeze every dollar out of the budget to have long-lasting materials, hard materials, tiles and things that look great but will last a long time with low maintenance. Important thing about the exterior is be a good neighbor. I'm not going to turn you all into architects. I wouldn't wish that on any of you. No, I'm kidding. I love being an architect. But at any rate, gable roofs tend to, when people look across their yards or they tend to drive by, the gable roof form tends to be a form that feels pleasing to them and it feels like it fits in their neighborhood. Just think about a house. So that's why we have a gable entry for the school. But when you start to get gable roofs across a big school, roofs get pretty big. You can think about Perryworth and the big green that you notice. Also gets a little bit more expensive. So we're just trying to be very mindful of your budget. So we created a clever design that kind of blends gable roofs for entry forms where people are mostly walking in, get the scale right, but then be very efficient with basically a low sloped roof and brick walls. Brick also tends to be very timeless. People think it looks nice. It makes for a good neighbor. We get a lot of compliments about how we put these schools together and bang for your buck with the budget dollar. Really, I think in 2021 we had the lowest cost per square foot elementary school in the state of Indiana. And it was a beautiful school and they love it. This is kind of a view, I'm not sure anybody really ever sees it quite this way because our eye cannot capture the whole width of the building easily, but if we were to step farther back. This gives you an idea of what the entire building looks like end to end. It's very pretty. Metal panels help modernize the building just enough so it looks important and special, but it doesn't overwhelm and start to look like a corporate office park with a whole bunch of metal high-rise building. So you blend that with the brick in a clever way. And we like to use 2 or 3 different colors of brick to just make it more interesting and more pleasing. Thank you very much. Fabulous to be here. Nice to see everybody. Dr. Millman, Mr. Dennis, anything else you'd like to observe other than it's been great input every step of the way?
I appreciate bringing the sample book as well as the sample board this evening so the board can get a real good feel for what the classroom carpet's going to be, hallway, media center, countertops. And then I will take a moment just to remind the board that we have worked with our partners at Schmidt to adopt the interior finishes used in the elementary school in the designs of the projects we're working on with them, so that we have some economy of scale when we are purchasing carpet tiles and replacement tiles.
Yeah.
So our maintenance department, we can carry one set of classroom carpet tiles in their trucks if something needs to be repaired. And of course, we're able to buy it, hopefully, at a better price rate than we're getting for all the buildings. So either you'd like to add to that? That's
As long as it's being manufactured still, right?
Well,
That's
it's still
always.
being manufactured. There is always that, and we will have. It helps us when we to justify buying additional stock,
yes.
and having that stock in your warehouse here, because we know that it's going to be applicable to every building in the district. So that will be a wise use of the taxpayer dollars.
So on the exterior, I noticed that, you know, you have the gables that's surrounded by brick, and then you have the gym that's full brick. What is the lighter,
Color in the background up
Yes,
above the roof? So that's a panel, and its purpose is actually for the mechanical mezzanine. We call it mechanical mezzanine, so it's where the air handlers and those things that heat and cool. Yeah, and we switched, 2 things. We switched to metal because it is above the main building, so brick walls would be more expensive to support. And then second, what we find is when it's that light color, people drive by, it kind of disappears.
And it covers up those units.
Yeah, it's actually
Yeah,
it's actually a room.
surround- Yeah.
It's actually
And it is
a
metal.
rooftop room
Right, like
with
a
a
metal,
roof.
yeah.
Very astute. Thanks for looking at that closely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for the
Awesome.
team while you
Great
have
job picking out the colors.
it? Yeah. Well, thank you. Mr.
Every
Dennis and I
night,
were
yeah.
like a married couple sitting there in the office picking out carpet tiles, and
I can neither confirm or deny that.
he won a few and I won a few.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much.
Just one quick clarification.
Sure.
Am I leaving the board for a day or 2, or you want me to take that with me? I do need to take these.
Up to you. Do you want to share them with the
You got
staff?
the binder, so you're good?
We have the binder. so-
Awesome.
We got the binder. We'll be
Y'all have a
fine
great
with the
evening.
binder. She has the binder.
We're going to try and catch you a little bit more daylight.
All right, sounds
All right,
good. Thank you.
Next, we have consent agenda, staff matters.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. For item 6A this evening under classified staff, asking for approval of items 143 through 146, which are instructional assistant positions for our kindergarten jumpstart program. Currently, Mr. Dennis corrects me if I'm wrong, is being supported through some of the ESSER dollars, if I'm not mistaken, to help those students and utilize those funds. You might see some certified staff members on that list. However, we're hiring them for the Jumpstart as an instructional assistant positions. That's why they're under the classified roster this evening. I'm recommending new hires 147 through 154. An SRO promotion, number 155. SRO sub, which is for returning SRO, number 156. Recommending approval of the resignation of 157 through 159, and terminations 160 through 162. For our certified staff this evening, recommending, again, this will be the certified positions for that kindergarten jumpstart program, to hire numbers 53 through 56, 2 maternity leaves, 57 and 58, a new position. This is to approve the salary for an already approved board position, but this is on the docket this evening to approve the salary. This would be number 59. New hires 60 through 65, and resignations numbers 66 through 70. For our ECAs this evening, recommending new hires 133 through 137, a sponsorship lay position 138, resignations 139 and 140, and approval of 2 volunteer positions 141 and 142. That's all I have for staff matters. It is still the summer and we still have many.
All right. So do we have a motion to approve items, classified items 143 through 162 as noted, certified items 53 through 70, and then ECA items 133 through 142? Do we have a motion to approve? I think that can all be done as one, correct?
Yes, as we
Yep.
typically have
Yep.
been, yes.
I'll move to approve.
Mr. Clauser?
We can't always separate those if a board member should choose at some point, however.
Okay.
If the board's comfortable
Yeah.
approving them all.
Yeah. Do we have a second? Is that Ms. Hutchinson? Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have business matters, consent agenda business matters.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. As always, the financial update should be the first. I think I'll still call this a packet, but it is becoming,
A booklet?
I might have to spiral bound this for us in
Phone
future
book,
meetings
whatever,
as I share all the pay applications and whatnot from the construction projects and the summaries. But on the front page, as always, you'll see our June 23 compared to June of 22, as well as year-to-date 2023 and year-to-date 2022. June's a big month for us, obviously. For revenue reasons and expenditure reasons. We make our debt payments in June on the expenditure side, but then again, we collect our property tax settlements, or I should say half of our property tax settlements in June. So that would be the reason. I know we're used to the slice of pie that's the largest being blue, but of course with the debt payments being in Object Codes 800, that's why the maroon is dominating this month. So. Following page, it is exciting to show our 13-month prospectus here with the operating referendum for the first time on the black side of the bar graph, as of course we were authorized to begin spending the operating referendum back on January 1st, but revenue doesn't come in until June. So we have that bar back on the positive side, and that's where it shall stay for perpetuity. So. And then, as I mentioned, our 3 major construction projects that we have going on, you've got our summary sheet from Meyer-Najum. Softball appears first, Harney, and then Perryworth, and then, as I said, as claims for building corporation money are not approved by the school board yet, I want to share those with you on a monthly basis, and that is, of course, the reason for the thickness of this and likely the continued increase in thickness of this particular item. So happy to answer any questions regarding the financial update for the month prior to reading the claims.
Do you have any questions? No? Again, excellent to see the softball field
It's
well underway, and Harney as well, and looking forward to seeing the other schools. as they
Absolutely.
become
Absolutely.
vertical.
If there are no questions, I'll go ahead and read the claims. And again, prior to reading the claims, the board will recall the school corporation did receive dollars as a part of the referendum bond issuance. The vast majority of them did go to the building corporation and are being held at our trustee bank. But I bring that up because the claims this evening are an elevated amount, and that is because Harney, which is the project being supported from school corporation money, we're starting to get some substantial pay applications from Harney. So those need to be approved by the board and therefore reported in the docket. And so that's why our claims subtotal is probably larger than we're used to seeing on a given month, and will likely stay there until we
completion.
we expend the school corporation money and Harney transitions over to building court money. So with that being said, claims for the month totaling $4,408,173.49, and two payrolls for this month, June 23rd and July 7th, in the amount of $1,763,019.96, for a total of the two $6,171,193.45.
All right. You are getting good. Do we have a motion to approve claims for payment 58074 to 58227 and payrolls for June 23rd and July 7th as requested by Mr. Dennis? Mrs. Jones. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Hutchison. Do we have any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Looking forward to the spiral bound. Yeah, so. Next, we have comments from the public. Do we have anything? No. Nobody. Next, we have action items. Item A, request approval of administrative contracts.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Parks. I'm bringing forward contracts for our certified administrators this evening. This is to ask for approval of their two-year contracts. There's been the practice of Lebanon to adopt two-year contracts for our principals, assistant principals, and certified administration. I will note that this does not affect their salary. They're not requesting the board any salary increases for the administrators this evening. This is just for the length of the contract. So it's you'll see status quo as far as that goes, with the one exception on the chief financial officer contract. There is a small material change, or a material change, I should say, in the language regarding deferred compensation. So that would be a part of my recommendation for this evening as well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the administrative contracts for 23 to 25?
I'll move.
Mr. Clauser. Do we have a second? Mrs. Jones. Any discussion? Again, this is for just the contracts, not the
This is
salaries.
contract length, yes.
Contract length.
Compensation will be addressed for our administrative team following our bargaining, collective bargaining, and we are confident in a positive and productive conversation, which actually will begin tomorrow. We're beginning the pre-bargaining with the teachers tomorrow, but we will not bring any administrative recommendations regarding salary until we have settled and ratified the teacher contract.
Excellent. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have approval, request for approval of renewed teacher appreciation grant policy.
Yes, this is a little bit out of sequence. We would typically do first reading and second reading. However, there's no change to this policy whatsoever. It is a requirement through the rules of the state of Indiana in order for us to provide the teacher appreciation grant to our teachers, which is calculated with a formula from the state of Indiana. That's a bit of a moving target. We'll know more about that in the fall. We have to provide the state of Indiana an updated board approval of this teacher appreciation grant policy. And so it has to be done annually and has to be approved annually. However, I do not think we've changed a word of this policy for probably the last 4 or 5 years unless it was a typo. So
Okay.
that's why we're not taking it through the first and second reading. We're just asking for an approval of that current policy so that we can pay our teachers in November, December when the teacher appreciation grant's provided by the state.
Excellent. Do we have a motion to approve the renewed teacher appreciation grant policy?
Make a motion.
Mrs. Hutchison. Do we have a second?
Second. Oh,
Which one? Paper, scissors, rock? for Mrs. Jones. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a second reading for policy update. You want to talk about this one? This is yours, yeah.
So the board will recall back in April, attempted to bring the purchasing policy back into line with Indiana state statute. Brought it for a first reading in April, only to learn that the policy as read at our first reading was no longer in compliance with state statute after the conclusion of the 2023 General Assembly's legislative session. So what we've done here for the second reading this evening is added that additional
Not necessarily in compliance, just not to the threshold.
Not to the threshold,
yeah.
correct.
So increasing it to the threshold, yeah.
compliance
Yeah.
means important things. I apologize.
No,
That's-
yeah,
It's the wrong word.
absolutely. Just, yeah.
Consistent with.
Consistent with,
yeah, there
yes.
you go.
So we now have the range for purchasing discretion versus three quotes versus public bidding process in alignment with what the state statute is with our purchasing policy.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve this policy update for purchasing? Mrs. Jones? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Clauser? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a request approval of ProCare contract.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Parks. This contract is with ProCare to provide speech language pathology services to our students. These will be students with individual education plans. It is becoming a bit of a trend in public education to contract with contracted services for these services as applicants for positions with us as employees of Lebanon Community Schools has dwindled, and we're beginning to see across all districts a real shortage in speech language pathologists, school psychologists, and many of us are now, because of that shortage, needing to contract with the contracted services to be able to meet those requirements under Article 7 for our students with these speech needs. So this first one, 9D, is for approval of the contract with ProCare for those services.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the ProCare contract?
Motion.
Mrs. Hutchison? Do we have a second? Mrs. Jones? Any discussion?
So will they come into the school, or will our students be going out?
Well, with the contracted services, it could be a blend. Some situations it's remote and virtual with students. Sometimes it is in person, but it would not require our students to travel or to go outside the school for the services. It would be provided in either through virtual services or in person.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
That would be based on the purpose of the IEP, whether it would be virtual.
One would hope that would be the best practice. In reality, if there's no available
Well, I think in the case of those who are, speech or hearing loss, that would need to be an in-person. I would want, if we were gonna hire for those services, I have children, 3 children
Sure.
like that. I
Yeah.
would expect them to be in person because the sounds that my children would listen, they would not hear in a
Right.
virtual.
Our deaf, hard of hearing instructor is an employee of Joint Services, and so that is not something that we have had to contract out. I will tell you, just in all frankness, yes, I would agree with you that that would be the best practice, but there are times the candidates do not exist. So that's the only available service at all with the proper licensure. That's the position public schools are in with school psych services, SLP services. As you can see in your background notes, we had posted these positions for multiple weeks with no applicants for the position. So it has been a struggle. It continues to be a struggle. With special education now, there are obviously things that we can do to adapt with other devices and work with the families and we'll purchase those items as the IEP might dictate. For us to be able to support students with hearing impairments as well as speech impairments. we are not in an ideal situation across the board with psychologists and speech language pathologists at this point.
Thank you. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a request approval of Stepping Stones contract.
Ditto for everything I just said, just a different company. This is a contract with Stepping Stones for the same services.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve contract with Stepping Stones?
I'll move to approve.
Mr. Clauser. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Hutchison. Any further discussion?
So why are we having two separate companies provide these
Sometimes they
services?
do not have the availability of the SLP. So
Okay.
as they become available, or they expand their workforce, and they may have someone available now. So Madeline Sandberg, Director of Joint Services, may call ProCare, and they have one available at that time. They're obviously trying to recruit as well. And so she calls all of the contracted services that she has some experience with, and their workforce can shift. So, ProCare might have not had anyone available, and Stepping Stones did.
So providing flexibility.
Yeah.
And so this would be on, that being said, this would be a contract that is paid by use, not not necessarily in a yearly annual contract.
It is
It's paid by use.
this
Hourly.
contract is 37 and a half hours a week, which is consistent with a teacher week, the number of hours in a teacher's week. It is not stipulated by the number of days necessarily, because that could, the IEPs could dictate that piece. If it goes above 40 hours, it's time and a half, and they charge an hourly
Hourly rate, though.
Mhm. Yes. These two contracts were reviewed by Mr. Franzen as well, so they do reflect legal counsel review.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is approval of McKibben demographics agreement for 10-year population enrollment study.
Yes, not all board members here at the table were part of our demographic study. I think one was at that time in 2019. Some things have changed within Lebanon and within Whitestown, and we feel that it's in our best interest to have an updated 10-year projection. That was 2019 to 2029. This one will be 2023 to 2033 with some of those enrollment forecasts. We being Mr. Dennis and I, met with Matthew Cropper of Cropper GIS. The board recently approved a contract with him. They have been hard at work. Our municipalities have been very cooperative and have been giving them a great deal of detailed data, and they've been crunching those numbers. They've created yield studies, yield outputs for every parcel and every address within our school district by type. And I will share that with the board. We're still distilling it. We had that meeting at 1 o'clock today, so I'm still distilling some of that information. Most of their GIS data that they have crunched for us is based on our current enrollment. So what they're moving towards now is looking at some of the potential yield studies if and when some of the planned developments build out and the timing of those build outs, and trying to make some projections on those yields in that 10-year window, which dovetails into Dr. McKibben's enrollment forecast. So they work hand in glove with their work together. So tonight I am asking for approval of another 10-year forecast with McKibben. I would just mention to the board that because of many of the shifting approvals and the growth that may happen in the next 1 to 5 years in our community, if the board gives me a nod in that direction, I'm happy to talk to Dr. McKibben about potentially asking for a 10-year enrollment forecast annually over the next, say, 4 years, as some of these developments become actually solid and get approved through the process, so we know that construction is going to start, and perhaps negotiate rather than the price this evening, which is $6,500 for a 10-year study. Perhaps if we ask him about a multi-year agreement to maybe, that might affect that price, and I can ask him about that piece. So just something aside, separate from this request this evening.
Yes, you and I discussed that.
We did.
Our demographics are going to be changing significantly, right, over the next
Yeah, it could be
couple
could be
years,
rapidly
or
and
could be-
significantly, yes.
Yes. So do we have a motion to approve the McKibben demographics agreement?
I'll move to approve.
Mr. Clauser, do we have a second? Is that Ms. Jones? All right. Any further discussion? Any other thoughts about the looking maybe on an annual basis?
I think that's important.
Okay.
Yep, I'll talk to
So
him.
talk to him.
I will be informing him of, if the board votes in the affirmative in about 20 seconds here. I will inform him of that, and we'll discuss that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is the school police wage recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. As you recall, we do the vast majority of our classified staff raises November meeting for an effective date of January 1 of each year. Unique classified staff group that is not done at that time is, of course, our school resource officers. Board will also recall that the compensation increases given to staff, classified staff, at the beginning of this year were in response to a bit of a case study, creating a comparison group for us and recognizing that we were behind, quite frankly, with some of our neighboring school corporations. And in the interest of being an attractive place to work, we adjusted those classified staff wages at the beginning of this year. Very similar logic here with the school resource officer raises effective for this school year. In looking at our neighbors' postings for school resource officers, it became apparent that we were behind there as well. And as the board will recall, we have unique's probably not the right word, but not the most. We have a school resource officer in every building. We believe in the impact that has and the importance that has. Other school corporations do not do that. I guess I'm attempting to convey we have a need for one in every building, as opposed to maybe asking one school resource officer to be responsible for 2 to 3 buildings. So with that being said, we have changed the compensation model for school resource officers, implementing a base, a 1-year probationary rate, which is similar to law enforcement. I always say when not talking about schools in the real world, but if someone were to be a sheriff or a police officer.
Municipal.
Municipal police officer, yes, probationary rate. After that 1-year probationary rate, they would elevate to the base, rewarding years of service with a stipend per year. I shouldn't say stipend, a base increase with each year of service, and then as well as an increase to the second in command, if you will, a lieutenant. So happy to answer any questions on the proposed school resource officer raises for this year.
I would just jump in and thank Chief Smith for his work on this, as well as Mr. Martin, and gathering some of that research and helping us get to this kind of newer model for you.
And we do annual reviews as well on the evaluations and yes, absolutely. Okay, excellent. So do we have a motion to approve the school police wage as recommended? I'll get Mrs. Hutchison and Mrs. Jones a second. How's that? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Is there additional compensation in terms of any pension plans or anything like that applies towards SROs?
Yes.
That we contribute to?
Yes. We offer a 250% match up to 3% of contribution from classified staff.
Okay.
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have request of approval of Cash Wagner agreement.
Yes, bringing the board tonight, request approval for services rendered at Lebanon Middle School for Cash Wagner, who is a consulting, engineering, and surveying firm. This is for topographical survey, utility survey, boundary survey, and private utility locates for the work that Schmidt, the early investigation that Schmidt is doing at Lebanon Middle School. Cash Wagner was the firm that was associated with Gibraltar for doing work kind of in that area of our campus, and they were chosen to continue survey for the middle school area for Schmidt.
Okay. And just a note on this one, there was a second agreement proposed that we're going to hold off. We have some questions about in regards to the elementary school offsite utilities. So have those questions. We'll pull that next month.
Sure.
Bring that up. So
Correct.
So do we have a motion to approve the Cash Wagner agreement for the middle school survey?
Move to approve.
Mr. Clauser, do we have a second? Lisa Jones. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a request for approval of priority trash removal service agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Bringing to the board this evening essentially an agreement that represents moving away from our current refuse removal vendor. Service has not lived up to expectations that we expect and need. As a result, we requested for quotations from multiple companies. Received two, presenting tonight the low bidder. This company is founded in Michigan, but recently has expanded into Indiana. They are the yellow trucks. If you've seen them driving around, they, when I say expanded into Indiana, one of their satellite locations is in Zionsville, so it's a Boone County vendor. I will say that this is an increased cost compared to our current vendor, but
the trash is going to be removed.
we have an obligation to service those on a daily basis to prevent the buildup of rubbish and vermin, quite honestly. So,
Critters.
Respectfully request the board's approval of this agreement this evening.
Thank you for doing that. Do we have a motion to approve priority trash removal service agreement?
Motion.
Hutchison. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
What percentage increase are we talking about?
So,
Just curious.
So last year, in total, just shy of $35,000 for removal of refuse services. That includes recycling as well. This contract will total over 12 months, $49,621. So roughly a 33% increase.
And this has nothing to do with construction, trash removal, anything. This is just trash that the schools generate.
Dumpsters that would be filled with everyday child nutrition waste and general classroom waste. And recycling.
Did
Paper
Waste
recycling.
Management provide any sort of guidances or response to any of the complaints or issues that we had?
Just curious why we'd be leaving. There were days of non-service that resulted in dumpsters that were full enough that they then charge extra for to remove because they're overfilled.
Right. All right.
Did we pick up any additional pickup days? Or did we keep the same schedule?
Same, yes.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a request to approve the use of the corporation credit card. Mr. Dennis?
Thank you. This is a request for usage of corporation credit card for our child nutrition director, Mr. Anstead. Will from time to time have a need to pay for invoices with credit cards. So just like the rest of our administrators, asking for approval from Mr. Anstead to be approved for corporation credit card use.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve Mr. Amstead to use the corporation credit card? Mrs. Jones? Do I have a second?
Second?
Mr. Clauser? Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a request for approval of Smart Systems Agreement. Mr. Martin?
Smart System is another one of those items that Airmark carried into their service agreement, and we now get to carry. Smart is having to do with the sanitizing systems for the dishes and all of the dishwashing equipment and chemicals. So in the last couple of pages, you'll see there's a couple of manual and, or 6 manual and 4 automatic dishwasher kits that they would install to keep the cleanliness up to Board of Health needs. They did need to have us commit so we could get these in place, so you'll see that it is signed, so you're authorizing
It is a
Dr. Millen's
retroactive
signature.
request.
We also didn't have to go to bid for this because it was covered by a CISC cooperative bid, so it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Already been publicly bid then, that way, yeah. All right, do we have a motion to approve the Smart Systems Agreement?
Motion.
Mrs. Hutchison? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Clauser? Do we have any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a request approval of LHS Tiger Leadership Camp overnight trip. Mr. Martin?
The high school Tiger Leadership Camp is a yearly event. This one happens to be this coming August. I've lost my page here, so I can't find it quickly, but you have the background notes there that give you the dates.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the LHS Tiger Leadership Camp overnight trip?
Move to approve?
Mr. Clauser? Do we have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Hutchison, second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a request for approval of Central Elementary Camp Tecumseh overnight trip.
Same thing, I'm locked up. Can't get him to come back awake, but you have the dates for the Central Camp Tecumseh trip. It's almost here.
September 14th.
Thank you, there it
September
comes.
Through 15th. Good to see it come back to Central. Do we have a motion to approve the Central Elementary Camp Tecumseh overnight trip?
I'll move to approve.
Mr. Clauser. Do we have a second? Mrs. Jones. Any further discussion? I just think it would be nice for you to note some of the concern with a representative here as well, we have, to note some of the concerns with the legislation that recently changed and how it may impact potentially
Yes.
us being able to charge additional fees
Right.
for student trips
Yeah,
like
these
this.
programs, we had a lengthy discussion with our elementary principals today, because trips such as this have been considered part of the curriculum as these take place during the school day. And now we have, with the information that we cannot charge for anything that is a requirement to access the curriculum, it puts, while the board's approving this evening, we are still determining whether these can take place, because typically it would involve some parents, or asking the parents to fund part of this trip. We've been informed that we cannot charge parents for anything that is a required part or is part of that curriculum. The unfortunate potential choice would be an alternative assignment perhaps for those who could not take the trip that would be equal to the standards that would be addressed on the trip. That is not something that for the reasons that you would all, I know, concur with, was not something that would land well with our school leaders, again, for all the right reasons. This is just one, I think, of the potential unintended, I would assume unintended consequences from this conversation. There are others. if I could, I'll dive into another area, such as school-owned musical instruments, for example, that are high-dollar ticket items, such as large brass instruments or percussion, or something that a student would not be purchasing on their own. As a former band director, it would be typical for us to assess a small maintenance fee. Those instruments get dropped, keys get broken. Things happen. We send them in every summer for repairs. It would be our understanding under the new law that we are not able to charge that fee. So now that will be part of the education fund expense as well. So funding field trips is not sustainable in our budget because the dollars that will be used to make up the difference, musical instruments, trips, feel that is going to come from the education fund, which is obviously how we pay our teachers, administrators, instructional assistants, and school staff. So it is a bit of a precarious position as we're trying to kind of weed through this minefield of questions that many districts still have around this item. So we're still bringing these items to the board for approval, so that we do have that pre-approval. However, I think I would be accurate in saying the jury's still out in how we're going to handle trip requests that are during the day and involves an entire grade level or an entire school that would have had some parent financial commitment in the past. So that answers your
Appreciate
question.
that.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make that, and, I know you have a heart for public schools too, and just to note some of the struggles we have as changes come about, so.
And sir, you said that you believed it was an unintended consequence, just an oversight from the legislature. Is that kind of what it looks like? Is that what ISBI thinks?
I
or-
don't know. I wasn't obviously in the deliberations. I think that sometimes there may be discussions. Again, I shouldn't assume because we know what the old saying around that. Perhaps was around the thought process of textbooks, consumable
I'm ultimately
text,
just curious if
right?
ISBA
And probably weren't
discussed-
thinking about this.
Yeah,
as
and if
that-
ISBA or any of the if any lobbying groups have been talking or discussing a possible fix.
These items
like
were
this.
brought forward by all of our organizations throughout the legislative process up until the day of passage. What was relayed to us after the passage by a legislator that presented and spoke to our School Business Officers Association was free means free. That's the guidance we've been given. Free means free. So the only way to interpret that is you cannot charge. So again, if you're thinking in terms of textbooks, workbooks, things of that nature, if you're thinking about parents not going to pay for textbooks. However, as I shared with the board, my dad taught me nothing is free. So we're going to still have to pay for the $200 per AP textbook and the rental that goes along with that. So it will just have to come out of the education fund. So it shifted the cost to the education fund.
And we're not sure how much we will get reimbursed for that, whether
Right.
everything that we.
Yeah, to remind the board, there was a $160 million allocation for textbook or for curricular materials is the way it's referred to in the rule. $160 million was set aside for the curricular materials. Schools will submit to the state reimbursement, a request for reimbursement. So you incur the cost. The board's aware we do that on many of the grants, title grants being an example. You request reimbursement. When those reimbursements from all of the public schools and public charter schools are received, once it gets to the $160 million threshold, it's not going to go above $160 million because that's what was appropriated. So at that point, there's really no reason to continue to accept reimbursement from public schools. At that point, they will shut it off and divide the 160 million equally among all the public schools. So we really know what we're going to get, because I can assure you $160 million is not going to cover what the reimbursement request from the schools will be. We have 3 or 4 grade levels that are above this threshold now. When you divide the $160 million, it comes down to, I think it was $151.88 or something that way. It's a projected number. So that's what would be reimbursed. That's the cap. So if we have a student that's in a 3 advanced placement courses, and in order to pay the payoff for those textbooks, for those courses, these are $200 college textbooks, you might incur a student fee of $175 or $185 or $200, depending on the courses that they take. So that difference between the $151 and what the actual cost of those materials are, books are for that class, would come out of our education fund. So yes, it's a moving target based on student schedules, based on the courses, based on what the textbook companies charge us for materials or the consumable costs might be. So it is a bit of a moving target. Our crystal ball is that the $160 million will be eclipsed pretty quickly when the request for reimbursements go to whatever agency Mr. Dennis submits them to.
The intention will be to bring to the board in May an education fund to textbook rental fund transfer, much in the same way that we transfer from education to operations. As part of the 2024 budget that I'm building right now, I've added another interfund transfer line that will represent whatever that delta is between our incurred costs less the reimbursement from the state. We will transfer that one time in the month of May for this upcoming school year to negate the unrefunded expenditures, if you will, in the textbook rental fund. So that's how we'll be accounting for this. We will be preparing invoices, much like we always have, except instead of sending them to parents, we'll of course be reporting those to the state. We'll get that revenue one time in December. There are a lot of school business officials that are curious about move-ins at the semester. That revenue was collected for that student at the school corporation that they spent the fall semester at. So there has been some conversation about invoicing and receiving invoices from sending and receiving school corporations. I may be invoicing receiving school corporations, and we may be getting invoiced when our students move out at the semester. To go back and answer your question about a potential fix, Mr. Clauser, IASBO, I won't say is hopeful. As you know, very little happens in the even year General Assembly. So in the legislative session in 2024, much like the funding floor for teachers, the 45% rule, we were able to explain more about that after it was passed, and it was changed to 62% when you factor in benefits. So the hope maybe is this could be here to stay, but maybe there's a more appropriate number, 200 million or 220 million. I think once the state sees the amount of money that's going to be submitted to them, it's a very simple equation. 160 million is the numerator. The denominator is the number of students. I'll add it's non-public students as well.
Yes, it is. I'm
Public
sorry. Thank
charters
you.
as
You're
well
right.
as non-public
Thank
students
you.
as well.
I added charter,
That's
but I
that's
didn't
the
add
denominator. Just over 1 million, so that's where we're getting the roughly $151. And as Dr. Milliman said, we already have grade levels with just textbooks that are over the 150, and that's before we really understand. It's difficult from the administrative center to know how much we were asking parents to pay for previously. Whether it's Dr. Milliman has enlightened me about the various consumable items that happen in a marching band. Pieces of an instrument that are consumable. We cannot ask parents to purchase those anymore. We will have to purchase those. So this will be some information gathering on my part to understand just how much we have been asking parents, because certainly my office would know about the textbook rental fees, but it's these one-off consumables that no one ever thought about, and now we do.
And this doesn't, Sorry, this doesn't extend though to extracurriculars outside of.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
It's to access the curriculum. So as you
Right.
can see on this request, Mrs. LaCrone has attached standards. It's,
Right.
it's a curricular-related item. We can't ask parents to pay.
Right.
So like band competition, jazz band, or that's not an extracurricular. You know, they go to competitions, they have costs associated. I paid those costs for food or whatever, so we can no longer.
It's a good question. I mean, I think those are ones we haven't discussed. If that's a class and the student's receiving a grade and it's required participation,
It is.
we have to, you know, those are things that we'll have to, or it's all or we don't go, you know, either the boosters fund that. But that's a great question. I don't think we even vetted that piece. I've used my personal example as of a parent of a percussionist. I wouldn't even want to count the number. I have a trash can still in his closet of the broken sticks over the course of his 4 years as a percussionist. I bought every pair of those sticks, and I didn't blink because his best friend played a alto saxophone that cost his parents $4,000 or $6,000. So my $50 per semester fee for my son to beat up the school's drum and drop it on the pavement from time to time, and to pay for his drumsticks was not offensive to me. It only made sense to me because he was using that school equipment, and he was, quite frankly, he really was abusing it. That was his job. So again, that was part of my thought process in saying the unintended consequence, because I don't know if that's always the picture that was in folks' mind. Perhaps it was. Perhaps it was. Or what Mrs. Hutchinson brought up. But we have been very fortunate to have productive conversations, as Mr. Dennis pointed out. Legislators have been very receptive to my questions. And so this is the first year for that. I mentioned before, we're beginning the bargaining process, however, with our teachers. And so this moving target is another added challenge to school districts that will be going to the table trying to determine what can we bring to the table
For 2 years.
for 2 years with this moving target out there, because as Mr. Des pointed out, we won't bring that transfer of funds until the end of the school year. We must, by statute, have a new contract in front of the board in October with the teachers. So there's layers of this complexity here that this has caused, for sure.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Just want to make that known, so. Yep. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, upcoming board meetings, next meeting is August 15th. It's also a budget session. But then first day of classes is August 3rd. It's hard to believe he's here already, but.
Yep, I will mention just briefly before you drop the gavel, Lexi Britt Buis has been reaching out to, or will be soon, to community members to welcome our students back, I believe, on August 3rd. If you recall, we asked our community groups to welcome our students back at the doorways of our schools. So I would invite the board to do that. She'll be sending some of those invitations out. It's always fun to see those smiling faces. Do more smiling faces in kindergarten, I found sometimes, than I do with the seniors. But nonetheless, we smile at all of them, regardless of whether we get that smile back. So I do invite you to be part of that. It's a great morning.
Excellent. With that, we will.